Hey there, deep divers. Welcome back. Ever wonder what actually happens behind the scenes when, your favorite app updates or a company rolls out some massive new system? What stops everything from just, well, breaking? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the surprisingly complex world of change management. Okay, let's unpack this. So, our mission for this deep dive is to explore the policies, the procedures, the resources organizations use to navigate change. And this isn't just simple software updates, it can be huge infrastructure overhauls too. Now, it might sound really technical, but honestly, change management impacts pretty much every aspect of how an organization functions, how it keeps up in this dynamic world. It's really all about minimizing chaos and ensuring things keep running smoothly. Continuity.
That's exactly right. And change isn't just constant, it's accelerating. So understanding how it's managed isn't just for the IT folks. It's crucial for anyone interacting with modern organizations, which, let's be honest, is basically all of us these days. And for our chat today, we've drawn some really great insights from material by Becker Professional Education Corporation. They laid this stuff out with remarkable clarity.
Okay, so let's start right at the foundation then. When we talk about change management, what exactly is that? What are we defining here?
At its heart, it's the system, the framework, really. It's the set of policies, procedures, and resources that govern any kind of modification within an organization. Now, these changes, they can be internal, right? Like a new company initiative, or they might be an external, think new regulations, or maybe a shift in the market. But here's the critical piece, the thing to remember. Almost every single one of these changes, no matter where it comes from, it's going to impact the IT infrastructure. That means hardware, software, applications, maybe even just how data is handled.
And the scope, like you mentioned, it can really range wildly, can it? You could have something as routine as, say, applying a security patch to an app. Happens all the time. Or you could have a massive, super complex overhaul of a company's entire IT architecture. But regardless of the size, the goal is always the same, right? Mitigate the risks, minimize the disruption to the core business. You want to evolve, but you don't want to break the machine that's already running.
Precisely, yeah. And to actually achieve that, a robust change management process isn't just, a nice to have. It's pretty much non-negotiable for success. It's how a company makes sure it can keep up with what's needed without losing its ability to operate or hit its strategic goals. The Becker material outlines this really comprehensive 11-step process. We could probably simplify that a bit, maybe think of it in 3 key phases. Okay, so first, you've got the planning and approval phase. This is where you figure out the need, you design a high-level plan, got to have goals, get the management buy-in, hammer out a budget and timeline, and assign who's responsible. And this phase is also super critical for identifying potential risks, trying to spot problems before they actually happen. Then you move into the, let's call it, execution and testing phase. Here, you lay out a clear roadmap for implementation, get all the resources you need, train the people involved, and critically, you test thoroughly. You test the system change before it goes live. Very important. And finally, there's the review and monitoring phase. So after you execute the plan, you don't just walk away. You constantly review and monitor the change. You keep testing as needed to verify it's working effectively long term. It's really a continuous cycle. Refinement.
That sounds incredibly thorough. But, in your experience looking at those steps, which ones do organizations maybe underestimate or even skip? The ones that lead to big problems later?
Yeah, that's a great question. Often it's that risk identification piece up front and also the ongoing monitoring at the end. Those sometimes get shortchanged. Companies get really eager to implement, get the new thing out there.
Yeah.
But they maybe don't spend enough time really thinking through what could go wrong. Or they kind of assume that once it's live, the job's done. And that can be a huge mistake.
It sounds almost like it's an insurance policy against chaos, in a way. I'm curious, though, for a company that doesn't have these processes buttoned down, what's the immediate, the tangible consequence they're most likely to face first?
The most immediate thing, usually unplanned downtime, or maybe a significant security vulnerability. See, without a structured approach, changes often get rushed, or they're not tested properly, or they conflict with existing systems, and that leads to system crashes, data loss, or, opening doors for cyber attacks.
Yeah.
It really comes down to stability at the end of the day.
That makes total sense. Okay, so speaking of structure, organizations don't just push one big red button to make changes live, right? You mentioned they use these carefully separated types of environments. Tell us about those.
Absolutely. Yeah, think of it like a carefully managed assembly line for software, but segregated. So first up, you've got your development environment. This is where the blueprint gets drawn, the raw code gets written. It's the initial creative space. Programmers are in there writing, modifying code, using all sorts of tools for editing, debugging. Then it moves to testing. This is a dedicated space, like quality control. The code gets put through its paces here to find errors, bugs. Some places actually keep this totally separate from development. The idea is to focus only on debugging something that's almost finished, without the distraction of new code being written.
Okay, so dev is writing, testing is finding bugs. What's next?
The really critical jump is to staging. Now, staging is designed to be a mirror image, or as close as possible, to the live production environment. Here, the almost finished application gets final phase testing. They check everything: functionality, compatibility, security, performance, right before it goes out the door.
Like a dress rehearsal.
Yeah, exactly. It's the final dress rehearsal before the big show. Only then does it move to production. This is the live environment. This is where the application is finally deployed and available to the end users. It's the system you or I would actually interact with, the public-facing one.
Okay, so that's four. Is there one more?
Yes, and it's crucial for peace of mind.
Hmm.
Disaster recovery, or DR. This is a whole separate setup, maintained specifically to quickly restore applications, save critical data, notify management, and basically ensure the organization can get back up and running if there's a major outage, or, worse, an attack.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate safety net, for business continuity, even in the worst case. And the key to all of this is separation. None of these environments should bleed into each other, because any disruption there can cause chaos downstream.
Wow. It's kind of astounding, isn't it? How much infrastructure and process goes into what seems like a simple app update sometimes. But even with all these safeguards, these distinct environments, the real world, well, it throws curveballs. So what are the biggest traps? What are organizations trying desperately to avoid when they undertake these complex transitions? What keeps those IT leaders up at night?
That's a really crucial question, because identifying these potential pitfalls, these risks, it's actually a core part of change management itself. And these risks, they aren't just lurking at the end. They're present all the way through, right, from acquiring new stuff to final implementation. And they can affect everything: existing systems, processes, even the people, the employees.
Okay, so let's break those down. Maybe start with selection and acquisition risks, because problems can start even before the new tech is actually in the building, right? Like a lack of expertise. I can imagine a purchasing agent, maybe they don't have the deep tech knowledge needed, so they buy software that doesn't really fit the company's actual needs.
Exactly. You end up with something that just doesn't work right or doesn't integrate.
Or maybe there's a lack of a formal process for buying stuff. If it's kind of haphazard, you could easily see overspending, maybe buying things that don't align with the overall IT strategy.
Inappropriate transactions, yeah.
And then there's the big one: software or hardware vulnerability and incompatibility. You buy something new, looks great, but maybe it lacks critical security features, or it just flat out won't work with the systems you already have. That sounds like a nightmare.
It absolutely can be. And to try and mitigate those specific acquisition risks, organizations often look to frameworks like the AICPA's Trust Services Criteria, specifically CC 5.1. Now, AICPA, that's the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. They set best practices, and CC 5.1 is all about controls around system acquisition. Think of it like a quality checklist for buying tech. So from the company side, this means doing annual risk assessments to make sure those risks are covered. And from an auditor's perspective, like in a SOC2 engagement, that's a type of art checking security, availability, privacy controls. They rigorously test these change management processes related to acquisition.
Got it. So that handles getting the stuff. What about once it's in the door? You mentioned integration risks. Sounds like this is where the human element really comes in.
It often is, yeah. Integration risks can be some of the toughest to manage because they involve people and the complexities of existing systems. So, for example, user resistance. You roll out new tech, but employees, maybe they don't adapt, or they ignore the training, or just don't follow through with the changes. That's a huge hurdle.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then you might have a lack of management support. If the bosses aren't providing the resources or really backing the change, it just amplifies any resistance from employees.
Right, makes sense.
Similarly, lack of stakeholder support. This could be negative reactions from employees, sure, but also suppliers, maybe even customers who are affected by the change.
And then there are the practical things, like resource concerns. Maybe the change is just too expensive, or it takes too much manpower, and that leads to a weak or ineffective implementation.
Definitely. And a massive one is always business disruption. Making big IT changes, especially to core infrastructure, always carries that risk of causing system failures. And that can hit core business functions hard.
Ouch.
And lastly, there's the challenge of lack of system integration. Tech evolves so fast. Companies often have a mix of systems, including older legacy systems. And sometimes those older systems just struggle to adapt or integrate properly with the modern ones. It creates friction everywhere.
Okay, so that's internal integration. But what about when companies bring in outside help? You mentioned outsourcing risks.
Right. Sometimes organizations outsource parts of the change management process, maybe to save money or get specific expertise. But that comes with its own dangers. You might face a lack of organizational knowledge. The third party, they might not fully grasp your business model, your specific needs, and that can lead to disruptions. There's also the uncertainty of the third party's knowledge and management. You're kind of rolling the dice. Maybe their management is weak, their staff inexperienced, or they just lack the right tech expertise for your situation.
That sounds risky.
It can be. And a really significant one is lack of security. Outsourcing IT functions often means sending sensitive data outside your walls. So there's a major risk that the external company doesn't have adequate safeguards. That could potentially lead to data breaches. Huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely huge. It really becomes clear, listening to all this, that a lot of these technical risks, they're actually symptoms of deeper issues, right? Organizational challenges, human factors.
That's a great insight. Yeah. Change management isn't just an IT problem to be solved in the server room. It's a business imperative.
Yeah.
It touches everyone, every process.
Which I guess raises the big question then, knowing all these risks exist, how do organizations actually build the safety nets? How do they put safeguards in place?
Precisely. So once you've done that hard work of identifying all the potential risks in the change management process, the next critical step is designing controls. And these controls are specifically put in place to minimize the chance that those risks will actually cause business disruptions or, negatively impact the IT systems.
Okay, let's walk through some of these key change management and new system controls. What do they look like in practice?
Well, first off, you need clear policies and procedures written down. Guidelines that outline exactly how the whole change management process should work, start to finish.
Makes sense, like a rule book.
Exactly. Then, for those unexpected moments, you need emergency change policies. These are like fast-track procedures for crisis situations.
Yeah.
Think a critical security patch that needs to go out now, but even though it's expedited, it still needs to maintain an audit trail. Proper controls, you need speed, but also accountability.
Right. It can't just be the Wild West.
No way.
Yeah.
You also need standardized change requests. Using consistent forms and protocols helps keep everything organized, timely, and impact assessment is also crucial. This is where you analyze, you document what effect a proposed change will actually have on the business. What are the potential disruptions?
So you know what you're getting into.
Pretty much. Authorization is obviously key. Requiring approvals from designated levels protects against unauthorized or ill-advised changes getting through.
And you mentioned this earlier, but separation of duties, this seems fundamental.
It really is. Properly distinguishing job roles. Like, the people who develop the code shouldn't be the same people who deploy it into the live production environment. It protects assets, protects information.
Got it. What about when you're moving whole systems, migrations?
Yes. For system migrations, you need conversion controls. These are designed to minimize data errors when you're moving information from an old system to a new one. Data integrity is key.
And what if something goes wrong after you flip the switch?
That's where reversion access comes in. This is absolutely vital. It's the ability to roll back, to revert to the previous system or process if unexpected problems pop up. One way to manage this is through parallel implementation. That's where you run both the old and the new system simultaneously for a period. Acts like a live backup.
Okay, that makes sense. A safety net.
Definitely. And of course, you need testing. Pre-implementation testing verifies everything's working before it goes live. Then, once it's in production, post-implementation testing validates that it was implemented correctly and is working as expected.
And it doesn't stop there.
Nope. Finally, there's ongoing monitoring, continuous periodic reviews to make sure everything keeps working well over the long term. Promotes long-term success.
Wow, that's a lot of controls.
It is. And tying back to those SOC2 engagements we mentioned, organizations undergoing those audits need to annually evaluate how system changes impact their internal controls. This means doing risk assessments, looking at everything. Economic shifts, new regulations, physical security, business changes, new product lines, even management attitudes and vendor relationships.
Why so broad?
Because any one of those factors could potentially weaken a control or introduce a new risk. Auditors then review these assessments to make sure management has identified any need for new controls to mitigate those risks. It's all about staying current.
Okay, so it's clear that all these controls are there to try and prevent problems. But
Correct.
then, how do you actually know if it's all working? How do you prove these systems are functioning like they should? What does this all mean in practice?
Right, that's where rigorous testing comes into play. Organizations have really detailed procedures for testing and implementing change control policies to make sure they're actually operating as intended. Now, it varies a bit depending on the specific application or infrastructure, but there are some core elements you always see. First, you absolutely need acceptance criteria.
Acceptance criteria. What are those exactly?
They're basically measurable, specific standards that management uses to objectively evaluate changes. Are they clear, properly tested,
Yeah.
documented, approved by the right people, reviewed afterwards? These criteria can be quantitative measurable numbers, like system uptime needs to be 99.9%, or page load speed under 2 seconds. Or they can be qualitative, like maybe a testing panel rates the perceived performance as good or excellent, or an expert gives a simple yes or no verdict on whether it meets a specific regulation.
Okay, so clear goals for what good looks like. What else?
Another absolute critical part is logging. This is just the process of recording events, everything that happens into logs or databases. By capturing communications, changes, access attempts, companies can verify if their change control policies are being followed, and they can investigate if something goes wrong or looks suspicious.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about security event logs. They're crucial. They track who accesses shared resources like sensitive files or folders. If someone unauthorized tries to get in, boom, it's logged. Or proxy logs. These show details about which websites a user visits, how long they spend there. Remember that example from the Becker source? 1011202026, 4.35.55 p.m. User JADO 192.178 oro by D0 EDT HTTPS at CNN.com. And a couple minutes later, 10112026, 4.37.32 p.m. User JADO 192.178.0 10 GA https://www.cnn.com/business. That shows exactly what user JADO was doing down to the second. They're like digital breadcrumbs for accountability.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. They provide the raw data for monitoring. And monitoring is this continuous process. It ensures accountability, helps with troubleshooting, identifies problems. Employees are held responsible through their unique user IDs, audit trails, track changes,
Mm-hmm.
and log analysis, sorting through those huge amounts of data to find anomalies or unauthorized actions, is a common technique. Though, honestly, the volume of data is often so immense, you pretty much need automated tools to do it effectively these days.
Makes sense. You can't have someone reading logs all day.
Not manually, no.
Yeah.
And speaking of modern approaches, modern software development also relies heavily on testing, using continuous adoption. You hear terms like continuous integration, CI, and continuous deployment.
CD. Right. CI/CD. What's the gist there?
Okay, so think of CI, continuous integration, like this. Developers are constantly merging their code changes into one central master copy, and automated systems immediately build and test that integrated code. Because they integrate so frequently, bugs get caught much, much faster. Leads to higher quality software generally.
Okay, so integrating constantly. What about CD?
CD, continuous deployment, takes it a step further. Once the code passes all the automated tests in CI, it's automatically deployed directly to the live production environment. This massively cuts down the time between writing a piece of code and getting it out to users. Much faster release cycles.
Wow, that sounds efficient, but maybe a bit risky.
It does carry risks, absolutely.
Mm.
Not all code gets, manually reviewed in the same way. Bugs can occasionally slip through into the live environment. And there's a big cultural shift required too. Moving from a traditional build, then test, then deploy model to this continuous flow. It takes a lot more upfront work on standardizing those automated tests.
Okay, that gives us a good picture of the how, the testing, the logs, the automation. Now let's zoom out a bit. What about the broader strategies, the philosophies for managing change itself? The methodologies, it sounds like there are different schools of thought.
Indeed, there are. Two of the most common methodologies you'll hear about, especially coming from IT, are the waterfall model and the agile method. And while they started in software development, their basic principles are flexible. You can see them applied to change management in other areas too, like finance or logistics. The biggest difference between them really boils down to flexibility versus rigidity.
Okay, tell me about waterfall first. Sounds linear.
Very linear, yeah. The waterfall model is characterized by a strictly sequential approach. Think of different teams handing off work one after another, like water flowing down steps. Each team starts its work based on what the previous team finalized and documented. Only when one phase is totally complete does the project move to the next team. So visually, it's like art design.
Requirements, design, implementations,
Right.
testing, maintenance. A straight line.
What are the downsides of that?
Well, the challenges are pretty significant. It often takes a really long time, and you don't see any benefits from the new system until the very end. There's usually very little, if any, customer input during the process, and making changes once a phase is done. Extremely difficult and costly.
Mm.
Waterfall really works best only for projects where the requirements are crystal clear up front and absolutely guaranteed not to change, which is rare.
Right. Sounds kind of brittle, so what's the alternative? Agile.
Exactly. The Agile method was basically created to fix the problems inherent in Waterfall. Agile offers a much more flexible approach. It's characterized by cross-functional teams, people with different skills working together, often working simultaneously on different features or parts of the project. They usually pull tasks from a prioritized list based on customer needs. Teams work in shorter cycles, often called sprints, maybe 2 to 4 weeks long. This encourages efficiency and makes communication absolutely critical. Everyone needs to be talking constantly.
And the big advantage is
Flexibility. A key benefit of Agile is that it allows for changes in direction throughout the project, based on feedback from stakeholders, or maybe changes in technology. The project can adapt. The final outcome isn't set in stone from day one. It can actually evolve and improve as you go. Some core Agile principles are things like satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery, welcome changing requirements, deliver working software frequently, hold regular short meetings to stay aligned.
so it's less about following a rigid plan and much more about continuous adaptation and feedback.
Precisely. Yeah. There's a great example in the source material. Refraction Realty. They hired a software company to build an online client portal. RR had a clear vision, but they also wanted to be heavily involved throughout, so they chose Agile. During the project, the software teams worked quickly, simultaneously, on different modules of the portal. This allowed Refraction Realty to review and test these modules as they were finished, giving immediate feedback on how things worked, how they looked.
Ah, so they could course correct early.
Exactly. And those reviews actually helped RR realize they wanted 2 additional modules that weren't in the original plan. But because RR was involved continuously, the developers could incorporate that feedback, build the new modules pretty fluidly, without causing massive delays or forcing huge changes right at the end. And the result was a portal that Refraction Realty was really happy with. It met their evolved needs.
That real-world example really makes the difference clear. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to a specific but super important type of change. Patch management. Sounds small, maybe, but it's huge for security, right?
Oh, absolutely huge, yeah. Patch management is the whole systematic process of dealing with known vulnerabilities or software bugs. Vendors release patches or fixes between their major software versions to address these issues. It's crucial for keeping systems secure and running smoothly.
So what does an effective patch management process look like?
Well, there are several key steps. First, you need to evaluate new patch releases from vendors. Understand what they fix, what the potential impact is. Second, it's good practice to use a vulnerability scanning tool to proactively find weaknesses in your own systems that might need patching. Third, and this is ideal if you have the resources, test the patches in a non-production environment first. Make sure they don't break anything else.
Right, like in staging.
Exactly. Staging would be perfect for that, though not all companies can manage that step for every patch. Fourth, you need to approve and then deploy the patches. Usually this is done during scheduled downtime to minimize disruption to users. And fifth, after deployment, you need to verify the patches worked, and then do ongoing monitoring just to catch any unexpected system issues that might crop up later.
Is there a risk involved with patching?
There is one significant risk with scheduled patching. Sometimes, when a vendor announces a vulnerability and says a patch is coming, the bad actors, the hackers, they see that announcement too. And they can try to exploit that vulnerability in the window between the announcement and when most organizations actually get the patch installed. It's a race against time sometimes.
Wow. Okay, so that's patches. Now, what about when it's not just a patch, but a whole new system, a complete overhaul? You mentioned there are different system conversion methods for that big transition.
Yes, absolutely. When you're migrating entire computer systems, could be software, hardware, data, or all three from an old system to a new one, organizations have several different strategies they can use. And the choice really depends on their specific situation, their risk tolerance. Smaller companies might be a bit more aggressive, maybe go faster. Larger, more complex organizations often choose more cautious paths.
Okay, what are the main options?
Well, the most aggressive is the direct method, sometimes called the Big Bang. You basically just cease using the old system and start the new one immediately, maybe over a weekend.
Whoa, high risk.
Very high risk. If that new system fails or has major problems, your business operations could be severely impacted, maybe even stop entirely. No fallback.
Okay, what's a safer option?
A much safer, but more resource-intensive option is parallel conversion. Here you run both the new system and the old system simultaneously for an extended period. The big downside is the sheer effort involved potentially doubling the workload for staff who have to enter data into both systems, reconcile them. But it provides a very robust safety net. If the new system has issues, the old one is still running.
Got it. What else?
Then there's the pilot method. With this approach, you perform the conversion on a smaller scale first, maybe in a single department or a specific location, or just with a test group of users. While this pilot is running, the older system continues to operate for everyone else. This lets you validate the new system, work out the kinks, make adjustments before you roll it out fully.
That sounds sensible.
It is. Another common one is the phased method, sometimes called gradual or modular conversion. Here, you gradually introduce the new system, maybe module by module or transaction type by transaction type, while the old system is still operating and being phased out. This is often useful for businesses with lots of different locations or divisions. They can implement site by site, for example. Allows for a more controlled transition.
Okay. Direct, parallel, pilot, phased. Any others?
Well, finally, you have hybrid approaches, which basically means organizations create a custom combination of the other methods, tailored specifically to their unique needs and circumstances. Maybe they do a pilot for one part and then a phased rollout for the rest.
So visually, if you imagine time flowing left to right, direct is just a sharp cutover, old stops, new starts.
Exactly.
Parallel would be two lines running alongside each other for a while, then the old one drops off. Phase might look like the new line slowly ramping up as the old line slowly ramps down, maybe in chunks.
That's a good way to picture it, yeah. Often broken into segments or modules.
And pilot would be like a small early bubble of the new system appearing alongside the main old system line before the full switch later.
Perfect visualization, yes.
It's really fascinating how many different ways there are to approach these major transitions. And it seems like through all of this, testing is just constant. All systems need ongoing change management testing, right?
Yeah.
To prevent issues, catch vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. Constant vigilance.
Yeah.
And just as importantly, you need mechanisms in place to reverse changes if something does go wrong. The rollback capability.
So drilling down into testing itself, what's the fundamental purpose? Why all this effort?
Well, the primary purposes of software testing are really threefold. First, it determines if the software is actually operating as expected. Does it do what it's supposed to do? Second, it's about discovery, finding errors, defects, maybe missing components, gaps in functionality. And third, it verifies that the final product genuinely meets the needs, both the business requirements and the end user requirements. Does it solve the problem? Is it usable? The actual software testing process for change management usually follows a pretty systematic approach. You establish a plan, design test cases, execute the tests, log the results, fix the defects found, retest. It's a cycle.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier something about a review board, a CIB.
Yes, the change review process. It's often conducted by a formal change advisory board, or CAB. Having a CAB is highly recommended. Why? Because it helps organizations properly plan for change, but also respond effectively if there are unwanted outcomes. The CAB's role is to approve and document changes, make sure users are notified about upcoming or past changes, and deploy the necessary resources for testing and responding to any issues that arise.
So they're like the gatekeepers.
Kinda, yeah. They ensure proper controls are maintained, like making sure you have those separate environments, testing, staging, production, making sure developers don't have direct access to push code live. They also often push for things like automated notifications whenever code changes occur, so there's visibility.
Is there an example of what happens when you don't have a CAB?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
That Lasso Co. example from the source material is pretty stark. They're a large healthcare billing software provider. They had a separate development environment, good practice, with a replica of customer data for testing. But they hired a new developer. And, crucially, they temporarily turned off a control that normally prevented test data from being submitted live to insurance companies.
Oh boy, I see where this is going.
Yep. The new developer, working in what they thought was just a test environment, unintentionally resubmitted a batch of actual claims that had already been processed and paid. Led to duplicate payments, clients spending hours trying to identify the errors, even triggered an audit for one client.
And Lasso didn't catch it internally.
No. The client identified the problem much later, If Lasso had had a properly functioning CAB, several things might have happened. The control likely wouldn't have been turned off without approval and monitoring. Or, at the very least, the CAB would have been alerted immediately when that change occurred, allowing managers to respond much faster, figure out what happened, and fix it before it caused such a mess.
Wow. That really drives home why these formal review boards aren't just, bureaucracy. They're essential safeguards.
Absolutely essential, yes.
So when unwanted changes are discovered or something goes wrong after a change, what's the immediate action? You mentioned rollback.
That's where rollback becomes critical. The CAB, or the IT team responsible, needs to notify users before they reverse or roll back those problematic changes. This helps prevent lost work or confusion. And doing a rollback effectively requires having a complete inventory of your system configurations for applications, operating systems, everything, so you know exactly what state to restore the system to. And just like with implementation, you do post-implementation reviews after a rollback too, just to verify that the change was correctly uninstalled or reversed.
Okay. And finally, just to round out the testing picture, what are the common types of tests performed during this whole process?
Right. There are several standard types. Unit testing is usually the first step. It examines the smallest testable piece of an application, like an individual function or module of code, focuses on just that tiny unit in isolation.
Smallest piece first.
Okay. Then, after the units seem okay, you do integration testing, sometimes called thread testing or string testing. This is where you check if different units or modules work together correctly once they're combined or integrated. Helps find issues in the interfaces between components.
Make sure the pieces fit.
Exactly. Then comes system testing. Here, you're testing the entire integrated application as a whole, verifying that all the combined modules work together as designed end to end. This is often done by a separate quality assurance QA team.
Testing the whole machine.
Pretty much. And finally, there's acceptance testing. This focuses on the user. Does the application meet the end user's requirements and expectations? This might involve beta testing, where you release it to a group of target customers outside the company for feedback. Or it could be end-user testing internally, where employees who will actually use the system test it out.
Got it. Unit, integration, system, acceptance. Makes sense. Wow. Okay.
Oh.
We've really covered a lot of ground here. Gone from the highest level concept of change management all the way down to individual logs, testing types, specific methodologies. It's just so clear that change management isn't just about some big one-off tech project. It's this fundamental, incredibly detailed, ongoing way that organizations try to minimize risk and adapt in a world that just keeps changing. It really is like that invisible scaffolding holding up so much of our digital world. And it's so deeply tied into human processes, decisions, not just code.
It really is.
Yeah.
And if we kind of connect this back to the bigger picture, understanding these processes, even at a high level like we've discussed, it helps us appreciate the often invisible safeguards that keep things running relatively smoothly most of the time. Every single app update you download, every new feature you see pop up on a website, every system tweak you encounter at work, chances are there was a pretty rigorous process behind it, all designed to ensure stability, security, and minimize disruption. It's really a testament to the complexity of modern organizations and the proactive effort required to prevent, well, chaos.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. As organizations constantly evolve and you interact with their systems every single day, how might recognizing these change management principles, this idea of structured adaptation and risk mitigation, how might that help you better navigate changes, maybe even in your own professional or personal life? Something to think about. Thanks so much for diving deep with us today. This was fascinating. We'll catch you on the next one.